good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are live. We are live, and we've got an amazing show lined up for you today. We are talking about mobility personified. I'm super delighted that we have on the show with us today the wonderful Nicole Milman, who has lived and worked in so many different countries throughout her career. She's going to be talking about being an expat child, being an expat spouse, being an expat mother. It's going to be a fascinating conversation. So we are really looking forward to meeting with Nicole in a moment. Now, if you're out there, I'm hearing we're having a little bit problems with comments coming in. But if you can comment, then please do and let us know who's out there and what's going on in your life. And I'm seeing some comments coming through on LinkedIn. So please, hopefully this thing on LinkedIn will resolve itself. Anyway, we've got a wonderful show for you lined up. What I do want to do is tell you a little bit about next week. Next week, we've got revolutionizing communication in relocation. And that's very, very exciting subject too. So we're going to be talking about how we communicate within our industry. I think people are beginning to come in, which is wonderful. I see hello to Mena from Egypt. I can see Michelle Keach coming in, Tara Bonner from Carolinas. So LinkedIn seems to have sorted itself out, which is wonderful. So great show for you next week, all about how you revolutionize communication in relocation. And trust me, there's some stuff there you will be fascinated about, things maybe you haven't thought about before. But more on that next week. The other thing I want to say, of course, is that we do offer CPE credits. So it depends where you want your CPE credits from. But we offer CPE credits from Worldwide ERC. If you want your GMS or your CRP credits, we offer CRP credits from HRCI, courtesy of our good friends at Rocket Mortgage. And we also offer credits from SHRM. So lots of great credits there. So if you want your credits, do make sure to take them. Again, I'm seeing Candy Hale coming in from Boston. We're seeing Bindu coming in from India. Namaste to you. People are coming in from all over the world. There's been a lot of developments in the last week. A lot of people seem to have moved job, and there's been a lot of jobs on offer out there as well. So let's have a look at what is the breaking news, what's been going on in our industry over the last 7 days. Well, here it is. Let's see some breaking news from the global mobility industry. All those wonderful jobs out there, loads and loads of jobs out there at the moment, which is very, very exciting. Big shout out to all our new change makers. Big shout out to all the people who've moved job in the last few days. I noticed Ian McCluskey moved at partner level to KPMG. So congratulations to him. Lots of other great job moves out there. Special shout out to John Kerr, who won the the Expat Academy Players Player Award. As I understand, that is actually voted by other members of Expat Academy. So many congratulations to him. So we've got lots of really exciting stuff going on. And also I can say that at Benevo, I think we've had a record number of new starters this week. I haven't put all their names up there, but I think we've had about 7 or 8 new starters starting on a single day. So exciting times, everybody at Benevo. We're now going to move on to talk about immigration. And we've got, as ever, we've got the wonderful Julia Onslow-Cole with us. And Julia this week has really been hobnobbing with the great and the good. So let's hear a little bit about it and bring onto the stage Julia Onslow-Cole.
Hi.
And now you're just back from Manchester, I believe, which is the centre of the UK's political world this week. And you've been meeting some pretty impressive people. Let's put up a photo of who Julia has been with this week. Let's get that photo up there. Okay, so for those who don't know, hopefully most of you do, but Julia, who have you met? Who were you with this week?
This is the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak.
Okay, so we are all, I think, super impressed that there you are with the Prime Minister of the UK. So tell us a bit about it and what are you going to talk to us about today?
Yes, so today I thought I'd just sort of talk about the party conferences and also, what I was doing at the party conferences. I was actually there primarily in my role as the chair of the London Chamber of Commerce and Industry. But, it's really terribly important that people do engage with political process around the world. And in the UK, October is the conference season where all the main parties have their conferences and members can go, and also representatives of business go to talk to ministers or shadow ministers about their policies. And I can see Ian McCluskey in the audience, who is the most fantastic person, and he is a very well knows about this process and has been very involved, particularly with the Labour Party. But one of the things that's really important for people to understand in business is that in the larger companies, all of them will have government liaison people. And in my experience, there's not a lot of linkage between global mobility professionals within big organizations and their government liaison people. And sometimes, I've worked on quite complex matters, and it's really quite shocking how little joined up there is between those the people who are really leading the business, from global mobility and others, and then government liaison, because government liaison do get access to these ministers, and they're always at the conferences, and there's a day where you can actually get direct access with all the ministers, and you can put forward quite a lot of strong positions, and the benefit is really quite huge. And one of the themes that ministers were saying to me, which is something applies globally, is that they get increasingly upset when companies don't respond to stakeholder engagement. And they actually put out papers and say, we're thinking of changing the law in this way, that way, and companies don't respond. And they were saying, even if you can't respond and you don't have time to respond, to all of the details of a very detailed response, even if you just wrote a letter, that would be fine. But they say time and again, they put out these potential laws or potential policies, none of the companies respond. And then after they've, moved it down the track, people get very upset. So I think that's quite a lesson.
If you don't ask, you don't get.
Yes.
And if you don't ask, you can't complain.
Exactly. And they were, they were also talking a lot. We talked a lot about finance and the regulation. And again, they say people, get very upset about regulation, but then, they moan about the regulators, but they don't want to moan to the regulators. And they say, you've got to be a bit more transparent. But the other thing I just wanted to talk to you about today was the fact that it was also, one of the big topics of the conference and the discussions with ministers was about trade deals. And obviously the UK's, left the EU, and, there's a lot of focus on the making of trade deals. And I spoke on this panel with Chatham House, which was about when you're making trade deals, should you really bring in values? Should you be bringing in values about human rights and rule of law? And what place do they have in the negotiation of a trade deal? And I think it's a very interesting point, because geopolitically, we're finding ourselves in a position post-pandemic, post all what's happening in China, that, there's a lot of sort of insular movements within companies, and we're kind of moving away from that idea about big global trade. And, that's a real shame. And for the UK in particular, we've always been a trading nation, but there's not that many avenues that you can now bring to another country, your views on human rights, etc. And so trade deals is one of those areas. And how weird life is, and how all sorts of things happen in life, which honestly are so weird that you wouldn't actually believe it could happen. But in the morning of the day that I was making my speech about this, and on behalf of the London Chamber advocating that more women should be involved in the negotiation of trade deals, and that impact assessment should be made to show how these trade deals were impacting women, I went to another roundtable, which was also about trade. And I sat next to this very lovely lady. And when we came out of the meeting, and we haven't talked to one another, but we came out, it was raining. And I said, "Oh, do you want to share my taxi to the conference centre?" And she said, I said I was going to talk about this issue. And she said, "I actually work for the UK government, and I was on the negotiation team for the trade deal with Bangladesh. And in that trade deal, we managed to negotiate something with the Bangladeshi government to protect women working in factories. And it was very far reaching, and it was way more than you'd need for a trade deal, but it was a really good example of how you can influence situations positively during the negotiation of a trade deal." So I thought that was amazing that, I happened to...
That's a huge point. And one of the things that, that I always say is that we in global mobility are sitting at the real intersection of the values of our companies that we work for, what they're trying to do, and the value systems of our countries and what they're trying to do. And we are, we are that. And so we have got a voice that maybe as an industry, we're not using enough to actually say, there's two sides to this coin. There's the side that your country wants to do, and there's the side that your company wants to do. And you need to balance it. We are going to have to move on, Julia, but that's a fascinating point. And it's obviously been, as I think Bindu put up there, I mean, it's been a really significant week for you, and many congratulations of being really a voice of our profession at some, at these such senior levels, right up at prime ministerial level is, you can't really get any higher than that. So kudos to you, and once again, many thanks on behalf of everybody in the industry for the work that you do with us on The View from the Top. We're now going to move on to talk about tax, and actually there's a bit of an Indian theme carrying on here, because obviously Rishi Sunak was the first Prime Minister of the UK of Asian heritage, and now we're going to be moving on to talk about India from a tax perspective. So carrying on that theme. Anyway, we're going to bring onto the stage Julie Barron from Vialto Partner with her colleague Ritika Arora, also from Vialto Partners. Ritika. Julie, tell us a bit about what we're going to be talking to, and then over to you, Ritika.
I just want to say first that that's a really hard act to follow, that Julia, I don't have any pictures with myself and any famous politicians. So, but today we are going to talk about
next week. Do it next time you're on the show.
I'll work on that. I'll go drive down to the White House and see what I can do. But today we're going to have my colleague Ritika talk about some new changes in employment tax in India.
Yes,
so over to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Brian. Hello, everyone. This is Ritika, and I'm director with Rialto Partners India. And I'm excited to be part of this forum today. Thanks for joining. So today I'm going to talk about the amendments in relation to the valuation rules, which are applicable for housing benefit provided by the employer to its employees in the private sector. So it's been a while that these rules are in existence, but there has been no change in these rules by the income tax authorities. But recently there have been some amendments which are quite positive and welcome. In India, the benefits provided by the employer, whether paid in cash or in kind, it is taxable unless it is specifically tax exempt. So benefits given in kind is called as perquisite, like company provided accommodation, cars, stock options, etc., etc. So for each type of these benefits, there are specific valuation rules which have been prescribed under the tax laws for taxation purposes. So any rent-free accommodation provided by the employer to its employees is taxable in India. It can be in any form, like in hotel, apartment, house, temporary accommodation, furnished, unfurnished, so on and so forth. So recently, the Central Board of Direct Taxes has notified certain amendments into it, and these changes are effective from 1st September 2023. So these changes are applicable for two types of accommodation, which is provided to the employees. One, where the accommodation is owned by the employer, and second, the accommodation is taken on lease or rent by the employer.
So that's most cases. Many cases.
Yes. So in order to understand these new rules, let me just briefly cover that, how it stands as on 31st of August, because the changes are effective from 1st September 2023. So the old valuation rules were based on prescribed percentage of salary income of the employee, mostly 15% of the salary, and to compare it with the rent paid by the employer. So if the accommodation is taken on rent, but if the accommodation is owned by the employer, then the question of rent doesn't arise. So the lower of these two, 15% or the actual rent paid by the employer, is the valuation of this benefit. So this means that any increase in salary income would result an increase in the valuation of this benefit and alongside increase in the tax bill for the employee. So there may be a situation where the tax on this benefit is increasing year on year, despite the fact there is no change in the accommodation provided to the employee. So to plug this, in the recent notification, the CBDT notified two major changes. The tax authorities notified two major changes. One, they have reduced the prescribed percentage of the salary income. So currently, mostly it is falling 15% bracket, but now this has reduced to 10%. So this is something which will actually tangibly reduce my tax bill. And second, interestingly, a maximum cap in the valuation has been introduced, which is based on the cost inflation index, where the same accommodation is provided to the same employee year on year basis. So it will actually ensure that it is not only the increase of the salary which will result into increase in the perquisite value beyond the inflation level, because now my valuation is restricted to the cost inflation. So the inflation will have a major role in valuing this perquisite.
And what should people So just moving this on. So I understand that we've got that. So is this something where people should be contacting their tax advisors for planning and for compliance? Is there...
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you are right, because the cost inflation index as such, it is available in the public domain. But as to how to value, how to compare the value which exists as on today and the inflation based value, so it is better that one should consult their consultant to have the correct valuation of this perquisite and accordingly calculate the taxes.
Okay, so thank you very much, Ritika. That's really helpful. Yes. So I think the message that I'm taking away from this is that these new rules have come in with effect from 1st of September, and that it's really important that people get good quality advice from Vialta partners, whoever their tax advisor is, to make sure that they understand both the compliance issues and the planning issues associated with it. So that's really helped you. Thank you so much for being part of our show today. We're now going to move on. So I'm going to say, let's give it up. Let's give a really big thank you to Ritika and to Julie, and we're going to say goodbye to them. And now we're going to move on to talk about the top 100 and the updates there. I'm delighted to bring to the stage Kennedy Layton from Benevo. And just to remind everybody, I'll show the video now, but just to remind everybody, nominations are open for the top 100 community champions. So if you know somebody in global mobility who, to put it simply, has given back either to the industry or to their local community and is doing good in some way, then let's recognize everything they've done and celebrate this time in our top 100, the top 100 community champions. Time on the show. Welcome to the show. Everybody out there in LinkedIn world, hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button as we say hello to Kennedy for the first time on the show. Kennedy, what are you going to talk to us about today?
We have some very exciting Benevo updates to share. As you already shared the video, and I believe Tally put the link in the chat, we have our nomination for the Global Mobility Top 100 Community Champion, which is very exciting. So start nominating. The next announcement that we have is for our corporate associates. Today's the last opportunity to join for the Benevo London event happening tomorrow. And I believe, Brian, you're going to be sharing.
I'll be there. I'm sharing it. Come along.
An insider view to Benevo that you don't want to miss. Tomorrow, we also have a Changemakers event happening in Houston. During that session, there's going to be a focus on AI and GPT and how that's impacting global mobility. So that's super exciting as well. And then looking ahead to the Global Workforce Symposium in Boston, mark your calendars for October 19th because Benevo has some exciting things happening. Nitsan will be part of a panel session on October 19th at 10 a.m. discussing public policy insights and maintaining compliance and evolving technology landscape. Also on October 19th from 12:30 to 12:50, Benevo will have a tech kiosk in the Innovation Lab of the exhibit hall. So please come stop by and visit. As part of that Innovation Lab, Nitsan will be demoing cost estimate scenarios. And then finally, Benevo will also be hosting a corporate-only breakfast on that same day. So lots of exciting things happening at Benevo and things to look forward to for sure.
Absolutely. And I'm sure it's going to be a great ERC event for everybody who attends, and everybody who's going has a fantastic time. Do stop by and see us, see our booth if you're out there. So we're going to move on now. I'm super excited that our special guest now is Nicole Milman. So this is, I mean, Nicole is really Mrs. Mobility. I've called it Mobility Personified. So without further ado, everybody, let's bring onto the stage our very special guest, Nicole Milman. Now, you know how it works. I've said it before, I'll say it again. Hit the heart button, hit the like button, hit the applause button. Let's give it a real good old-fashioned view from the top. Welcome to the wonderful Nicole Milman. Great as ever to see you.
Thank you, Brian. I loved all of the photos through my life. Very capturing.
Absolutely. We've got your entire life story there, because you really are someone who has lived and worked in many, many locations. We'll get into that. But actually, I did a poll on LinkedIn, and I'm going to ask the audience now. I said, how many overseas relocations have you personally experienced? And the choices I gave was none, I've never relocated, 1 to 2 overseas moves, 3 to 4 overseas moves, 5 or more, quadruple exclamation mark. So out there in our audience, let us know, just post your own view. How many times have you personally relocated cross-border? So not just interstate, not domestic, but cross-border relocations. How many have you done yourself? So, Nicole, whilst waiting for the audience to come in with their answers, just tell us how many countries, we'll go into your life story in a bit, but just in overall terms, how many countries have you lived or worked in? And let's name them.
6 or 7. 6. I'm going with 6. Unless we name them, then it's hard to...
And which are they?
So we've got Hong Kong, UK, Israel, US, Poland, China. 6.
Okay, so that's quite a life, and we're going to get into that because it obviously does make a difference to the way you approach mobility. If you've actually been there, done that, got the T-shirt yourself, we're seeing 2, 3, 0. 6 countries. Oh, that's a Kabine. I'm not sure who said 6. I missed that, came out so quickly. Nadira was twice. So a lot of people, it's Irene who's done 6 countries. So congratulations to Irene. It's almost like we're having a leaderboard up here. When we actually
they put 2 countries as well, so twice. So if we need to go twice, then we go more.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think we should have a little sort of country. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should have like sort of global mobilities. Who is global mobility's most mobile? And let's see. In terms of when we posted on LinkedIn, 25%, and these were pretty much all mobility professionals. 25% had said they themselves have never relocated. 42% said they'd done either 1 or 2 moves. 21% said 3 or 4. And 12% said they'd done 5 or more. Although I do wonder whether there was sample bias in there as well, and that people who sort of had moved more were more likely to say, oh, yes, they'd moved, and other people were slightly shy about it. But it's, anyway, let's just go into looking at this from your perspective, because you started off as, what's the nice phrase? I was going to say expat brat, but that's not the nice phrase.
Well, I would put it as a spoiled child. Yeah.
Okay. So you, and I mean, that's actually another very interesting thing is that here we are, we've got you in, that's in in Hong Kong as a child. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so you were born in Hong Kong.
Yes.
And so you were born when your folks were on assignment in Hong Kong. Okay.
So my dad got moved out there, and so my parents lived there for about 12 years, and so my older sister and I were born there.
Okay, so being an expat is literally in your DNA, in your blood. But so you were born out there. Now, when you were born out there, expats in those days, and we won't go into what those days means, but a few years back, it was very different now. I mean, now, you know, a lot of people are on sort of lump sum or expat light packages, but in those days, it was, I think, much more traditional. So tell us about your growing up as an expat kid in Hong Kong.
So definitely different from policies that I've put together or that I've worked with. Our life was very much privileged. So we went to international schools, Chinese international school. We had a house help. We had the apartment in the Middle Territory paid by my father's company. We had a country club paid for that. Actually, I'm privileged to say I'm still life members of. So when I go, I can still utilize it. We got flights home every year. So we would do a round trip back to the UK every year. So very, very privileged.
So very much what you might call the full fat version of the traditional version of an expat policy that you probably don't see so much these days. I mean, maybe very, you know, in certain industries you're seeing it, but most people have moved away from that. So what was it like growing up in that sort of environment as an expat kid?
So I didn't know any different, of course. I was born there. I was surrounded by the only lifestyle I knew, which would involve younger, obviously going to nursery or playgroups with my mom, going to the country club. As we got older, it would involve going to school with people who are in similar situations as myself, and then having the school bus take us to the country club, dropping us off. And it was almost like a large playtime after school. So we'd go and do swimming, diving, tennis, eat in the country club, go home and repeat. And then on the weekends, we would do maybe boat trips to the other islands around Hong Kong. But to me, that was normal. That was what I did as a child. That was the only thing I did know. So I knew that I have activities and fun.
And you were very much, presumably, in the expat community. You weren't mixing with the locals, apart from maybe, you know, the maid or the driver or something. But most of your community of friends were other international kids, I'm guessing.
They were. There was a large population of US, Australian expats out in Hong Kong.
Okay. So then cold reality dawned, and probably the emphasis on cold, because you came to the UK.
Yes.
And how old were you at that point?
So I was just about to be 8. So ending my 7th year.
So you'd lived your entire young life in the warmth and the luxury of Hong Kong, and then you came back as a British citizen to the UK. And what was that like? I mean, I don't know how much of it you can remember. What was it like coming back to the UK?
I remember. I remember clearly.
You weren't coming back. You were moving for the first time.
So obviously my parents were returning and they had wanted to return. So for myself and my older sister, it was a culture shock. It wasn't just because we'd been every year to see family. That had been to us holiday. So to arrive back, and I actually remember arriving back, and I remember my uncle came to collect us from the airport and took us to a house that to me looked kind of cold and gloomy and different. And I remember it being raining and grey. And I was thinking, okay, why exactly have we come here? And we came just at the end of the summer holiday. So we were nearing starting school, and I remember my parents saying, okay, we need to go and find a school for you. And that was also a culture shock. I remember looking at the schools thinking, this is nothing like the school that I'm used to. This doesn't feel, I didn't have a feeling of, oh, this is such a happy time as a child. And it was really hard. And I think often we forget about the children. Even when I do mobility now, I'm very conscious that, is there a family, is there a child involved? Because we assume, okay, we might be returning the family back, but does the child really know where they're going? Have we given them any cultural awareness? Starting school in the UK was different. And actually, it was very hard. People would make fun of me and my sister because we were born in Hong Kong. People would ask us, well, why were you there? Are you Chinese? What exactly is Hong Kong? Why have you come now to the UK? I remember even my mum trying to put us into activities and going tennis in the rain and the dark and with a coat, and saying to my mum after, I'm never doing that again. That was just not how we play tennis. I think if we really want to look at success when you move people, it is the families, and are the families aware? Have we given them enough support? Because as a child, I would say it's probably relevant to my sister as well, we never truly felt like UK was our home. We felt we were just in a country.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think let's put up a comment here. Ian McCluskey, yeah. Excellent points for your children here, powerfully made from lived experience. I mean, and I think Bindu said something similar. That's so true, especially for teenagers. But I mean, because it is a thing, we always concentrate on moving the expat. That's what we think of. It's our employee we're moving. We don't think so much about the kids. And your situation, was not unique. I mean, it's sort of not the norm, but you were born on assignment. So you came home, and home wasn't home. Home was a strange country when the family was being repatriated. You knew nothing. I mean, it wasn't a repatriation for you. So immense culture shock there. And certainly, I'm guessing that has made you a better global mobility professional because you've got more empathy with the family as well. But did that inject in you a travel bug? I mean, I'm guessing it did, because you didn't stay in the UK that long. So you got educated in the UK. So then what happened?
So then after my education in the UK, I went to Israel to volunteer on a kibbutz. So it was meant to be for a summer. I went to volunteer. I, however, met my husband, who had moved from Argentina during the Argentinian crisis to Israel. So I met him on the kibbutz.
We've got a photo somewhere there. We'll try and put up.
I then returned to the UK.
Go. Congratulations.
Thanks, Brian.
If I can do the laugh to wish you congratulations.
So I then returned back to the UK and then decided I'm going to move to Israel. So I moved and I lived there for a couple of years and married my husband. And then decided that I didn't want to live in Israel. Actually, that was quite bad for my husband, because I said to him, I'm leaving, so you can either stay or come with me. So he did come.
I'm glad to hear it. Okay, so that's a whole other conversation we could get into maybe later, is that you've got a sort of an Argentinian married to, well, I don't know what you are, sort of Hong Kong, UK, all the other countries you've been in, sort of medley of those sorts of different cultures. The sort of the expat marriage thing is, in fact, it was. I suppose it was an expat marriage. You were both overseas when you got married.
We were, although I don't think we consider ourselves expats there. So my husband had moved, and he considers himself, okay, he was a new Israeli, and my mom is Israeli. So in essence, I guess for me, it's not really, I wouldn't consider it an expat country. I would just consider it being with much more family than I have in the UK, in fairness.
Okay, so after that, that's when the work travel started a lot. So where did you next go? Let's get into some of these other countries and issues that came up.
So we then came back to the UK, and so I moved to the UK, and we had complications there because we had to get my husband his spousal visa to come into the UK. At that time was much more easy than now. So literally he went to the UK consulate with a letter from my father saying my father will support him, and he was granted his spousal visa. So he arrived in the UK. We lived in the UK for 3 years.
Much easier than it would be now, yeah.
It is, literally. He phoned me. He said, okay, I've got it stamped to my passport. And I was like, that's great. And so he arrived. We lived in the UK for 3 years. He worked in the UK, as did I. And I also studied. So I did my law degree in the evening. And then he was given an opportunity with his company. He worked with IKEA and was asked to go for this expansion they were doing in Shanghai. So we were moved across to Shanghai on an expat assignment where they did pay for our housing, our gas, electric, very fortunate. We also we were taken care of by them and had home leave, etc. But for me, I had thought we're moving to Shanghai and Shanghai would be the same as Hong Kong. That is what I had pictured in my head. I was like, okay, we're going back to my Hong Kong lifestyle. It wasn't quite like that.
And you went at that point as, to use a not very good term, you went initially as a trading spouse. So it was your husband's move. Yeah.
Yes, it was. And it was hard. There are things then, as I do my job, I relate with, where people come to me and say, well, why is it so traumatizing, for instance, having the medical checks? I can relate. China is traumatizing. You go in 12 rooms, you literally get pushed around from room to room, blood test, x-ray, scan. You don't know what they're testing you for. And then a few hours later, they say passed or declined.
Yeah, tell us about that, because I'm not sure most people know about that. Maybe all the immigration lawyers do, but I'm not sure everybody else does. So when you want to have a work visa, and this is still the case now, is it? In China, yeah. You have to go for a 2-hour medical.
It might be reduced now, but it was 2 hours in 2007.
And what were they prodding you for? What was it all about?
So you go through different rooms. So we had a DSP. They dropped us outside and they told us, we'll wait for you. So we walk in and you go into one room and you queue, basically. You go in, they do an x-ray. Then you go into another one, they do your blood pressure. Then you go into another one, they do your blood test. Another one, a scan. And I don't remember what else there is, but it's 12 rooms. And I remember also there was something with the scan for my husband. And they were talking in Chinese. He was saying he doesn't understand. And they were just like, okay, go, 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 go. 2 hours later, the DSP said to us that my test had failed. So I need to go back again, because without it being approved, we can't go and get the stamping of the work permit. So I had to go back, do another blood test. And then it was approved. And only once you have that certificate, do you then go and get fully accepted and approved.
Okay, so you're in Shanghai for a few years, and sounds like the Ellis Island setup. It's quite extraordinary. I must admit, I'm sure immigration lawyers knew all about it, but I didn't realise it was quite like that. So, and you actually started working when you were out there too, didn't you? So
yes, I did.
Okay.
I was working there. Also, we got pregnant in China as well. So we did return back to have my daughter. As unfortunately, actually, that's another thing that I didn't realize. Had we have had my daughter in China, she would not have been a British citizen due to the fact that I was born in Hong Kong in the year I was born. So my dad told me we need to get back to the UK to have her here. So we came back, we had her, we went back again, but only briefly, and then came back to the UK.
Yeah, China and expats can be difficult. I know from experience, I've spoken to somebody else about, expats had a child in China, and they had a problem because the Chinese authority said they had to get an exit visa, but to take the baby out of the country. And to get an exit visa, they said, well, how did the child get into the country? And of course, the child didn't get into the country. The child was born there, and this took a lot of discussion to get that particular sorted. Anyway, so you left China, and where was next work experience after China?
So next was in the UK. So I actually joined Deloitte in the internal team in the UK, doing mobility.
So this point you were in mobility yourself.
Yes,
you got into the
yes,
industry.
Exactly. So working internally, looking after the moves within UK, Ireland, Switzerland, anyone coming in or obviously going out. Predominantly working with the tax business line, which is very interesting. Now, obviously, being with a different organization that has the tax providers as my vendor partners. And it was interesting inside Deloitte. I would say we actually had probably my favorite team, bar from my team that I've got now. So my current team is my favorite, but that was one of the best teams that I ever worked with. So good that the 5 of us, including our manager, still keep in contact now. Like last Christmas, we went out for a Christmas lunch.
So shout out to all those wonderful people at Deloitte that you worked with.
There's only one left in Deloitte. Everyone else has left, however.
Hopefully they're still in the industry. So
they are.
So you worked in the UK, but then you moved on because your next trip was you went on assignment to the US. Is that right?
Yes. So I moved from Deloitte to EY, and then with EY, I got the opportunity to go to Dallas in the US. So we moved to the US.
Here we are. Okay, Dallas big. So there you are. And
this is meant to be the park. It's the only park. We asked, where is the park? We were sent to the little green space, as I put it. Like, yeah. So we moved to Dallas with our children. Ollie was a baby, and my husband took a couple of years out to be a stay-at-home dad and to look after the kids.
So many questions. Okay, I've got so many. Let me just start on the first one. So basically, you did. This sounds derogatory. It's not meant to be. You did to your kids what your parents did to you. So your parents, you were an expat kid, and then your kids were expat kids. So they lived the same experience. So from your perspective, at one point in your life, you were an expat child, and then you became an expat mother. What sort of learnings did you find, and what were the differences between being, the expat kid in Hong Kong and your kids being expat kids in Dallas?
Well, I think it was different in quite a lot of ways, because for me, I never thought, oh, I'm an expat child in Hong Kong. For me, I thought I was born there. This was my life. And then I moved to the UK and I had a culture shock.
The same with your son, you said was only a few months when he...
Well, yeah, so he was little, but... So he doesn't actually remember, because I got to the point of memory where I did remember Hong Kong, and I have my memories, my friends, and then I got moved away. With Josie, it was different as well, because she had her life in the UK and then she was excited. We're moving to the US. And the reception she received in the US, everyone's super friendly. And they loved the British accent. They used to call her like Peppa Pig voice, and she loved it. Everyone wanted to be with her. And we had sunny weather. So the kids actually, Josie definitely enjoyed it. And my husband was relaxing most days with Ollie around the swimming pool. It didn't look like a bad life. It looked quite cozy.
That was my next question, because again, there's a level of circularity in your life. As I said, you went from being expat kid to expat mother, but also your first trip, you went out as the trailing spouse supporting your husband's career when you went with IKEA. But then later on, he went out supporting you in your career, and he was the, if you like, the training spouse, and he was very much you said a non-working spouse when you're out in Dallas. So tell us about that, about the sort of the dynamics of those spousal moves where one spouse is working and the other spouse isn't.
To be honest, I think it was I would say it was harder for me than for him. Like, I worked from home. So yes, Tara, sorry I didn't see you, but I didn't really go into the Dallas office very much at all. So I was predominantly working from home, and I would see out of the window that he looks like he's having a really fun time. So I think it was harder for me. However, he had it hard because he had to be, looking after the kids, ferrying them to all their activities, taking Ollie to play groups, joining in with the school community, which he doesn't currently do much with the school community now. So he was very much the present parent, and I was more the working parent. Yeah, okay. I didn't really like that though. I felt a bit jealous.
Yeah, I can see that. Feeling of sort of missing out on stuff with the kids. I mean, it's difficult. But then you didn't stay in the US. You stayed there a while, but then you moved on to where was next stop in this peripatetic life that you've been leading?
So we moved to Poland, to Krakow. So we went there it was the only place actually that we went that we didn't do a look-see or any sort of trip to see that we would like that place. So we decided we'd move there. I moved with Philip Morris. Philip Morris have very generous, nice packages. It looked actually amazing on paper. So we arrived in Krakow. And I would say that was what I would consider a failed assignment. That was, we arrived, the culture was strange for us. The kids didn't integrate too well inside there, nor did my husband. He was still not working. He also realized he's not going to be able to work there. So we only lasted in Poland 6 months. And then my husband said he's taking the kids back to the UK. So okay, obviously I went. I didn't say
So, okay, I mean, let's talk about that a bit, because failed assignments, I suppose, are the bane of all our lives in mobility. If you'd been Philip Morris, if you'd been the global mobility manager at Philip Morris looking after your move, what would you have done differently to have stopped that assignment failing?
I think there was a lot of things that could have been done differently. We didn't do any cultural awareness. We didn't, like I say, have a look-see or even a trip of any sort, even myself. So
Mena's asking, is it because you were not prepared for the assignment? I mean, because you were a person who was used to assignments. I mean, you've done loads, even up to then you've done loads, but this one failed.
I think it was more to do with also the culture. And if we had done a cultural awareness, we would have noticed that. If we had looked at the schools, we would have noticed as well. Going to a school with 8 children as a British international school and none of them speaking English is hard for a young girl. She wasn't finding it the most fun experience to be in that environment. And I think also for Ollie, it was hard, even though he was young. He was what we call a really happy baby or toddler, and he would always be smiling and he would always be cheeky. So example, in the US, he would sit there in restaurants. We would go quite a lot out. He would sit and smile and wink at people in the restaurant. They would come and pat his shoulders, squeeze his cheek, say how cute he is. When he tried that in Poland, he would get looks of don't do that. Don't do that. He stopped doing it after twice because he was scared. And we could see also that.
I think there's a photo of you in your empty house in Krakow, is it? Or not you, your kids in the empty house in Krakow.
It is, yeah.
The day of departure.
Exactly. And so for us, it was also not only is the job good, are we enjoying that? Yes, that's fine. But I think you need to look at the impact of the whole family. And I think on that particular move, we looked more at what are we going to receive rather than is that going to work for our family? And not every time when you move, it's going to work for the whole family. And the family is actually the most important thing, because you could have an amazing day at work. You come home, and if your family is not happy, it's not going to make you content to continue being in that location. And so I think we as mobility can do more for the families. I always say we can improve employee experience, but we need to significantly improve the experience of the family if you want it to succeed.
Okay, we're getting close to the end of our hour, but I'm going to do a couple of rapid fire questions with you. I mean, the first one I'd ask is, which was your favorite location of all the assignments or places you've lived? What was your favorite?
Well, my favorite location will always be Hong Kong. If I fly into Hong Kong, I feel really warm and bubbly.
So even now, if you go in, so it's not just looking at it with rose-tinted spectacles?
No. If I fly in, I literally feel really, really happy inside. Okay. And I suppose second question is, what are the learnings that you've taken from this that you'd sort of, if you're trying to help another global mobility manager in their work, what are the lessons that you've learned personally that you'd share? I think the most important lesson is that the family will make or break the move. If you don't have the family on board, regardless what you do just for your employee, which should be 150% that you give to your employee, but if you don't have the family on board, that will never work. And it might not work. The family might leave, they might divorce, there could be a lot of stress. And you need to make sure when you're moving a family unit that everyone is on the same page. And I think we do have tools to enable us to do that. How important do you think cultural training is? I've put it as mandatory in my new policy suite that's rolling out in January. So that's how important I think it is. We're actually doing a session in, I think it's 2 weeks' time. Our session is on cultural agility, and we'll be talking about that. We've got a guest from Deutsche Telekom, we've got a guest from another company on, and we've got some people from Net Expat on talking specifically about cultural agility. Because I think it is one of those areas where a lot of companies turn around and say, we know it's important, but we don't have the budget. I think what you're saying is that it actually should be in the budget. I do. I don't think it's a very large cost for the benefit that the company can achieve. Yeah. Okay. And actually, one light-hearted question we had from Rob Zeitz, just put that one up there. Of all the countries you've been to, what was your favourite food? Which country had the best cuisine? Hong Kong again. Okay, so I won't ask you for the least favourite, so we won't do that. So Hong Kong is definitely coming up there. We are pretty much out of time, so let me just bring on our other guests. So I'm going to bring back Julie Barron. I'm going to bring back Julia Onslow-Cole. I'm going to bring back Kennedy. I'm going to bring back, I think Rikita has left us because it's late out in Mumbai at the moment. We've finished our hour of the show. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Nicole. Many thanks to Julie and Rikita for the tax update. Many thanks as ever to Julia. And again, hats off to you for managing to meet with the Prime Minister. Very, very impressive. Many thanks.
I must say quickly, Brian, that I can so relate to what Nicole said, because I was on sabbatical. Well, it's not a sabbatical, an assignment. My husband took a sabbatical to be in Hong Kong. And I remember he had the children or the baby, and he was on a junk every day. And because he was a man on his own in Hong Kong, he got so much help. And I was working so hard. And he was sending me photographs of him on a junk. And he wasn't even looking after the baby, that everyone else was looking after the baby. And I used to be fizzing mad in Hong Kong. And I remember going to that Hong Kong club and I just wanted to lie down in a darkened room there because I was so exhausted by the time the weekend came. And I just found it really hard. But I just so remember how perfect life was then there.
It's certainly,
I
Nicole,
second that.
Yeah, absolutely. Nicole, on behalf of everybody in the global mobility profession worldwide, thank you for sharing such an interesting and insightful personal history. You really are mobility personified. So many, many thanks. And to everybody out there in the audience, we've run just a minute or so over. Everybody out there in the audience, really hope you enjoyed the show. We will be back again next week, the same time, when we're going to be talking about a revolution in mobility communication. So fascinating stuff coming up next week. Take care, everybody. And I'm Brian Friedman. Have a great week. See you next week, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.